Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dairy at Guelph panelist discussion for January 2021. I'm very happy to speak with a few of my colleagues today who come from different research areas, and we will be addressing some questions that we received from producers. So I'm happy to introduce myself. My name is Christine Baes. We have together here Dr. Michael Steele and Dr. Eduardo Ribeiro, all from the Department of Animal Biosciences in the Ontario Agriculture College here at the University of Guelph. To start off with, I would ask our panelists to just give an individual introduction of yourself, a bit more detail about what kind of research you do, and that would be great. We'll start with Dr. Steele. Please go ahead.
Well, thanks for this introduction, Christine, and thanks for inviting me to this discussion. I was born and raised on a dairy farm just about an hour away from Guelph, and I've worked in industry as well as academia before coming to the University of Guelph 2 years ago. And the research program that I'm focused on is related to calf nutritional management. So I do a wide variety of research in this area. It really spans from colostrum, nutrition and how to feed that properly, all the way up to heifer management. And I also focus on gut health and in trying to find alternatives to antimicrobials in calf management. But some of my most recent research has really been focused on colostrum, and in our lab we're uncovering more and more bioactives. So there's not just immunoglobulins, there's hundreds of different bioactives that we're uncovering right now. We're trying to figure out how they contribute to calf health as well. We also look at transitions. So we look at the transition from colostrum to milk. That we think that that's really important to make sure that you do have a transition program for your calves, as well as transition to feeding more milk, especially in the first month of life when you don't have a lot of starter intake. We also do transitions related to weaning. So how to properly transition an animal when you're feeding a lot of milk to them, how to make sure that they're not going to have a weaning lag during this period. And last but certainly not least, in the field of heifer nutrition, we have this big black box, and that's anything after weaning. So the focus of research is really 0 to 2 months in the calf world, and we're trying to expand that more by looking at even prenatal development, but also after weaning. So we have a lot of research focused on that area and how to properly transition animals during weaning, but also how to feed them up into puberty. So in a nutshell, we have a very busy lab, but it's been very exciting here at the University of Guelph.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Dr. Steele. Dr. Ribeiro, could you give a few words of introduction?
Yes, thanks, Christine, for inviting me for this conversation. This is great. So I grew up in a small family farm in southern Brazil, and working cattle with horses, milking cows by hand, make artisanal cheese. So I think I can say that I was a real cowboy for at least 17 years of my life, or a gaucho, if you like, right? To respect the terms of South America. And so as a kid, I wanted to become a veterinarian, and I had an older brother that also wanted to do that. So we did. We went to vet school. My brother is still a practitioner in the region there. And when I was in vet school, I started to do research, and that changed completely my life, I could say, because I really fall in love for research, and I decided to pursue a career in academia. So instead of being a practitioner there as my older brother, I decided to go overseas, and I moved to US initially for grad school. So I did a master's in a PhD at the University of Florida. And during that time, I worked with fertility in dairy cows. And I was very lucky that when I was finishing my PhD, I got a position here at the University of Guelph, which was an institution that I always respect, that I knew since my early years in vet school. I had professors that were here for a short period of time, and spoke very highly about the institution here. And of course, when I was in US, I was very familiar with the program here. So I was very happy to move here in 2016. And so my research program is continues to be focused on fertility of dairy cows, but giving also a lot of emphasis on health of dairy cows, especially during the transition period, and the relationship between those two areas. So I think I can say that our lab has two main goals, which is to improve the health of dairy cows during the transition period. And we believe that by doing that, we improve a lot of what happens after the transition. So the production during lactation, the reproduction in that lactation cycle. And the second goal would be to reduce pregnancy losses and improve fertility of those animals. So we do a lot of fundamental research, but I always link it to those two applied questions. And normally the thought process start with epidemiological studies that show the importance of our research question. Then we move to fundamental research to try to understand the problem a little bit more in depth. And then the last part will be to propose an intervention or management change that can lead to improvements in that specific area. So that's what we working most. And I also teach undergrad and grad students in those two areas of animal health and fertility. So that is kind of a brief summary of our program here at Guelph.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ribeiro. My name is Christine Baes, and I am also in the same department as Dr. Steele and Dr. Ribeiro, but I focus more on the genetics and genomics of not only dairy cattle, but also poultry. I also, similar to both Mike and Eduardo, grew up on a farm. More similar to Mike because I didn't grow up in Brazil. I grew up about an hour west of here. And my studies brought me to Russia, and I spent a year in Germany during my undergraduate degree. Then I continued on with my studies, did a master's in animal welfare in Germany. And then I somehow managed to take a strange curve to quantitative genetics. So I did my PhD in quantitative genetics in northern Germany. I spent a few years working for industry in Germany and Switzerland before coming back to the University of Guelph in 2015 to take up my current position. I'm very fortunate to hold a Canada Research Chair in livestock genomics. And I'm really happy to be here at Guelph to work with such fine people as Mike and Eduardo. The main focus of my group's research is to improve and understand the productivity, the health, the welfare, and the efficiency of livestock in both in Canada and globally. So we really try to associate what's in the DNA to the phenotypes that we can observe. And we do that all the way from looking specifically at the DNA of individual animals and trying to understand the architecture of that DNA, but also all the way through to making the associations between the DNA and the phenotypes that have been deemed important. And then even further to developing breeding strategies and breeding programs for application in large-scale genetic evaluation systems. So that of that's being applied in Canada, but also genetic evaluation systems that are being applied globally. So it is a real pleasure to have this group of very young and motivated scientists with me today to discuss a few questions that we've received from producers. And I think that the goal of this conversation really is to show that no matter what field you're coming from, there are always the same types of questions that can be addressed. And it's really interesting to see the different perspectives. We have, of course, Mike with his nutritional background and Eduardo with his physiological background, as well as myself with a genetics background. We're all dealing with dairy cattle, and we can look at the problems and the opportunities that we see in the field together. And when we do that, I think that what we're going to see is that there are a lot of opportunities for cross-pollination and also for doing the best job that we can all do as scientists, as researchers, and as industry members in this field. So without further ado, I will come to our first question, which is what data should be collected on farm for replacement calves and heifers? This is a question that we received from a farmer in southwestern Ontario, and I will open the floor to Mike. What's your opinion on what data should be collected on farm for replacement calves and heifers?
This is a really great question, and I feel very passionate about this one because I don't think we're collecting enough data in this area compared to other areas of the farm. And I think it's important because growth in early life has been associated with lifetime production. So I think it's really important that we know our numbers more in that area. And with respect to growth, I would say every farmer should know their average daily gain on during the pre-weaning period at least, which requires a birth weight and a weaning weight. Now, this isn't happening on most farms, but I think in order to truly evaluate the success of your calf program, you should be at least taking those measurements. If you don't have a number value, really assessing the growth of your animals, you won't be able to make these relationships, and you won't actually know if you can make an improvement on farm. So I think at the very least, we should be doing that and just getting average daily gains on our calves. However, a lot more can be evolved. It's really exciting to see now automation take play in our industry, even here in Ontario, where you're seeing, scales where we can automatically weigh calves every time they go to a feeder. I think that's the future, and eventually we'll get there. But I would say if I had a wish list, I would say average daily gain is the one metric I would really want to see more so, not just pre-weaning the entire period, but if I only had one period, it'd be during the pre-weaning period.
Excellent. A very important time in the growth and development of our future herd. Eduardo, what's your opinion on this question?
Yeah, very good question. And I totally agree with Mike's comments. And I think related to what Mike just mentioned, recording the health events of calves is very important because that might impact growth and also the future performance of that animal. And I'm sure you, Christine, and other geneticists would also appreciate having good records related to that. And I'm sure you can comment the importance of this later. So the way I see, if we think about rearing cost of replacement heifers, that's a major thing about when we think about the economics of the herd, right? After feeding costs of the lactation herd, I believe that's the second largest expense in a dairy farm. So knowing those numbers, knowing what affects the rearing cost, the performance of those heifers are pretty important. So growth, health, the reproductive performance, that sometimes everything seems to be fine, working well, but if you don't know the numbers, maybe you're missing an opportunity there to make things more efficient, more profitable for the herd. So I would focus on the basics of growth, health, as Mike mentioned.
Yeah, and I think also inputting this data into your dairy comp or other software packages is really right now possible, and I think it's easy to do now. So I think that's a great suggestion also to record your health events into these software packages.
Yeah, it seems a little bit like you know, heifers and young animals are sort of the forgotten group in many herds. From a genetic standpoint, we see them being recorded when they're born. The birth will be recorded, but the next record that we have on these animals that goes into the official genetic evaluations is potentially the first time they were bred. So from my side as well, I think it's really important that we get some more data on growth and even health of these animals. There's a few different research projects that are now starting that are trying to develop a data pipeline. And Mike, you raised a very, very good point. We might be able to record health, and many farmers are actually recording health of calves. Some may be recording weights of calves, but none of that information is actually flowing further. So there are some great vet clinics, particularly here in southwestern Ontario, that are doing an absolutely fantastic job of recording for management purposes, but that information unfortunately doesn't flow further. So to those farmers and producers who are actually recording this information, it's great. Keep doing what you're doing. It's up to us to find out how to provide a non-painful way of making that data flow into a national evaluation where it can be used for things like genetic selection. I think that's I can
Christine,
only echo both of you.
do you know of any examples of other research groups that have already started to do this?
So Denmark has a really good, a really great system for recording health traits in cattle. They're not so much focused on calf health, but I think that this is where we have to go. And I think that many countries are identifying calf and heifer health and growth as really important areas that have been somewhat neglected in the past. Just because oftentimes these animals have to grow and they're not interesting really until they start providing milk or calves. So we have to sort of change the way that we think about this to really make sure that we're giving them the best start that we can, I think.
Just another comment, Christine, is maybe some of the producers might not see the entire value of doing this, but this really drives innovation, right? When we have access to that information, and I'm sure if you link this to the genomics, which has become more and more popular, perhaps we'll have better tests to predict what animals would be healthy at very young age, right? And that's would be a major advance, a major thing to have in the industry, right? Providing that data to people that are doing consulting service makes a real difference on how much feedback they can provide to the producer in terms of numbers and economics and how to make things more efficient. So there's a lot to be done with those numbers, not just because you have to enter a number in a computer. There are multiple reasons for doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you raise a really good point, Eduardo. There was a situation, there's a great example of a genetic defect or a genetic problem that got spread in the population very quickly. You might have heard of the cholesterol deficiency haplotype that was spread really through some really popular bulls. In the age now of genomic selection, we can expect that there's going to be a large number of carrier bulls that have mutations that haven't been really identified yet. And because of the speed of genomic selection and the speed at which it happens, people aren't using proven sires anymore. So if you've got a really popular sire who gets used a lot, that will spread these alleles that might not be so good. And that's another reason that we really have to improve our data collection on young animals, because we can already assume that this is going to happen. In the case of the cholesterol deficiency haplotype, animals were born and they couldn't keep cholesterol in their blood. So the heterozygous animals with one good copy and one bad copy, they were born normal, but between 3 weeks and 6 months of age, they really started to show that they were having a rough time. The homozygous animals, the ones with 2 copies of the bad allele, they couldn't survive. And they were being treated for pneumonia and for scours and for all sorts of things, but they were really genetically incapable of living. And in order to avoid this type of situation in the future, we really have to make sure that we've got a wake eye on the data that is coming from these calves. So absolutely, Eduardo, I think it is important, and it's becoming even more important in the age of genomic selection.
Christine, that really sounded like an intro to your next grant proposal.
I don't know. There's quite a few things going on right now, and actually we do have a project right now that is focusing on developing these pipelines for calf health. So if anyone is interested in participating, please do reach out, and we will figure out how to get your data into this research program. So I think we can move on. That was a great discussion of our first question. We have 2 more questions to address, and I think that they're really interesting for farmers in Canada and in Ontario. The next question is, to what extent are farms in Ontario and or in Canada involved in your work? So this is a question that has come from a group of producers actually who are interested in the work that we do here at Guelph, and how much we rely on farmers and producers, or do we just sort of do our research in here at Guelph and disregard the rest of the world? Maybe Mike, you can give us some insight as to how your research program works with regards to this question.
To be very frank, all the questions from my research come from farmers. So I'm completely ingrained in, as much as I can with farmers by speaking at conferences and visiting farmers and just listening, because a lot of my ideas come from them. But I also think because our research station has X number of cows, and my research program is quite ambitious. We've been partnering with a lot of farms across Canada and also the milk marketing boards across Canada with my NSERC Industrial Research Chair. So I work with producers all the time, and it really fuels my research program and also directs it. In a way, since we have this very ambitious program, and we need large numbers, and therefore we collaborate with large farms across Canada. So when I was at the University of Alberta, I worked very closely with Brevely Holsteins just outside of Edmonton. And it's been great actually with COVID, because now I'm doing less work in the US and now I'm in Canada more, which is wonderful. But we work with Lois, of course, Mapleview Agra, Grober, just finished an experiment at Walker Dairy, and even more experiments coming down the pipeline. I'm sure I've missed some, JP Brower as well. There's another experiment in Alberta. So I rely on this for my research program, and what it is really exciting about it is that farmers are very, in a good way, they're very critical, and it's great. They want to know the so what of all your research, and they want you, and what I try to bring to not just doing the experiment there at a farm, but also bring value there. So have my students, collecting more data for the farm or discussing new things with the farm, and vice versa, and becoming a member of the team. So even from a scientific output standpoint, it makes sense. From a question standpoint and communication directly with the farmer, it just stimulates that, which is always good for a researcher. Mm-hmm. But also the HQP and the students that we're training, it's really important for them to actually work directly with farmers, communicate, and set up projects with them. This is a skill set that they need when they graduate, because I think we're going to be collecting more and more on-farm data, and that's why I'm really happy to be back in Ontario and my backyard basically, and partnering with some of these great farms that we have locally in Canada.
There's a few excellent points you raised there, Mike, and I thank you for that. The fact that your entire research program is geared towards farmer questions is really great, and it shows that that there is a benefit to understanding what these farmers are going through. And I think that if you've got that contact on a routine basis with real farms, then you're not just doing research that is far removed from reality, but it is indeed being held to a high standard by your greatest critics, which are the producers that you're working with. That's awesome. Eduardo, what about you? How does your research program look? Are you involved in any on-farm work, or what's your approach to that?
Yes. So I think we try to keep open communication with farmers and with other ally industry around dairy farmers as well, to understand more what is happening in the industry. And I think that dictates a lot of our research questions. It influences how we see the research problems, how we propose solutions for that. So I think that's critical to have that feedback from farmers. Historically, I've done lots of research in commercial herds in the US initially, starting to do some things here in Canada. Still slow because I arrived here in 2016. There's a lot to do as a assistant professor initially, but over time I'm trying to build a relationship with local farmers, and we have some projects lined up to start in commercial herds now, and hopefully when this pandemic is under control, we'll be able to start and just make that relationship even more stronger. Knowing you guys and kind of the similar background that we have, it seems that we also feel that obligation to give back to farmers, right? Just because we came from families of farmers and we understand the importance of what is happening on a daily basis in the farm. So then I just cannot be disconnected. To be honest, I don't feel doing the right thing if I'm too far away from what a farmer is actually interested in discovery. So I think that is very important for our research program and for the training of our grad students, as Mike mentioned. I think that's critical too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you both raised really good points. We know what it's like to be on the farm, and I don't think many people realize that. I think they think that the University of Guelph sometimes is far away and we're all academics sitting in a bit of an ivory tower, but that's absolutely not the case. I think that both of you have highlighted the fact that the most interesting research we do is stemming from real producer problems, real producer challenges, and real industry problems. I get the feeling that we're all in the same boat. We have to address these different problems and different challenges together, but they can also turn into opportunities. Mike, you mentioned earlier, and Eduardo, you both mentioned the influx of technology and the use of technology on farms. Sometimes I feel like farmers are even more advanced than we think they are. That they've got the absolute best technology already implemented on their herds, and we need to speed up to harness the information that's coming from those technologies. Do you guys see that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of opportunity, especially in my field, to harness some of this technology that has been coming down the pipeline. In fact, like I think in the next 5 to 10 years, at least in my field of calf nutrition, this will really dictate the future path of how we're feeding animals and managing them.
For sure. Eduardo, I guess in the field of reproductive physiology and above all estrus detection, that's probably a great move as well, right?
Yes, yes, it is, Christine. So the I guess the field of reproductive management is always evolving, right? There's always new tools, new concepts around that we need to incorporate in management, see what works, what doesn't work, and um, um, how that translate in benefits to farmers. So yeah, you just mentioned, I think one important changing that is happening, which is increased use of activity monitors for detection of estrus. That's one of the reasons why producers are using. And they can also be used for diagnosis of diseases or health problems or feed management problems. So there's a lot to be done in that area, right? On how to incorporate those new technologies into management. So much data there that sometimes is even overwhelmed. So we have to find ways to simplify what those tools do at the farm level, how to better use that information to make smart management decisions. Um, and we can also cite genomics, which is becoming more and more important to fertility traits, and how we incorporate that into reproductive management too, working with guys like you, Christine, that understand really well how those platforms are work and how those prediction numbers are generated. So how can we take that information and make management decisions with the farmer related to not only to reproduction but to health or cooling decisions. Yeah, that's a lot to develop, to be learned out of those new technologies that are becoming part of the production system.
Yeah, and I think it's really good that we have such a tight connection to our farms, right? We might begin to see things from a research or academic standpoint, but really getting the crux of the matter and having expert farmers with whom we can discuss and who are feeding into this research, I think is a really exciting way of approaching the opportunities that are coming from these new technologies. I find it fascinating that we can speak almost across disciplines here and still have the same in the same vein. We've got a lot of commonalities in how we approach things. You guys have mentioned, you know, the ideas coming from farms. It would be pretty sad if we didn't have the ideas coming from farms, because our research then wouldn't be as relevant as it is to the industry. I know from my side, it is really important that what we do here matters to the industry and matters in the agricultural world, sometimes in Ontario, sometimes in Canada, and sometimes even internationally. And that's where Guelph really has a strong footing on the global stage, because I think what we learn from our farmers gets translated into science that is available then to the rest of the world. So I think that that's a really exciting part of what we do. So that's really good. And that also leads me to the next question, the last question that we have, that came again from a group of producers at an industry meeting, and that is, where do you see the biggest changes in your fields in the next 5 to 10 years? I think we've danced around it a little bit, but I'd love to hear from our nutritionist and from our reproductive physiologist about what your thoughts are on the biggest changes in your field in the next 5 to 10 years. Mike, please go ahead.
Wow, that's a big question, Christine. But if I had to look at calf management, I would say the use of automation and collecting more data on farm. And then not just doing that, but also making management decisions based on this data is the true next step. So in our field, there's a lot more group housing, a lot more automation with feeders, even scales that can weigh animals. not just milk feeders, but also grain feeders. So we can start integrating a lot of these things and feeding animals in similar to other species like pigs and chickens, which there's a lot more phase feeding, and we can, feed animals individually even. Just to give you an example, a 30-kilogram calf and a 60-kilogram calf at birth weight, they shouldn't be fed the same things, but that's what we do all the time on farms, and we don't have to. So I think even simple steps first, but these long-term programs where we're, really understanding, certain mitigation strategies that work based on some of the data that we're collecting from a lot of this automation on farm, I think is ultimately where we'll be in 5 to 10 years in my field.
Excellent. Yeah, that's exciting opportunities. Eduardo, how about you?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question, Christine, and I don't know if I have a good answer for that, but I think it's difficult to point to one thing, but I can talk about what I'm excited about the future in my research area. I think related to transition management, there's so many excellent researchers working on this area, and I think there is a big challenge to farmers, of course, but also to researchers to understand what is happening in terms of physiology and how that dictates health and the future production of that animal, future production and reproduction. So I think there's a lot to be learned, and at the same time that we learn those fundamental questions, then how do we translate this to animals having better transition and being more efficient in the farm? And so we can link that to technologies that are available, and how can we use that information to make things better as well. So that will be in the health part, is what makes me excited about. Related to fertility, I'm a little bit biased, but I really like to understand embryonic development and how that, why pregnancy loss is happening. And I think with the amount of information that different groups are generating, we'll be able to, at some point, have a better understanding why failures in embryonic development happen that leads to pregnancy losses, and come with the strategies to reduce that as well. And I think linking to your field as well, Christine, I think if we develop novel traits that can be used by guys like you to find some markers and improve the genetic selection for more fertile animals, I think that will be very important as well. And it's something that I can see happening in a few years for sure. I think it already does makes a difference with what we have today, but I see that becoming more important and more efficient in the future. So I also look forward to see this happening, watching the development of those new strategies there to improve fertility.
I think that's a really good. You brought some really good points. I think one of the things that I see coming, or one of the things that I hope we will see, is really the integration of different fields for ultimate improvement, for overall improvement, not only of specific traits, but also of a balanced breeding goal. From my perspective, we geneticists, we tend to rely on biologists and other people who are well informed of what traits are very important. And you mentioned the word efficiency, Eduardo, quite a few times, and I think that in our world right now, one thing that is becoming very important is feed efficiency. Of course, efficiency in all different areas, but in particular feed efficiency, where in Canada we're working towards publishing feed efficiency genetic evaluations in April of this year. But we're also involved in a very large international project focusing on feed efficiency. Now, with regards to fertility, absolutely, we've relied in the past on a few traits, and for those of you who are aware of the genetic evaluation for fertility, they're very lowly heritable traits. Things like interval from calving to first service are very much dependent on management decisions, and they don't have much to do with the real biology of the animal. So I think with input and with collaboration with people like yourself, Eduardo, we can really work towards improving the genetic evaluations and ultimately improving the fertility of our animals. Similar to what you're doing, Mike, with calf health, if we can come up with an efficient and pragmatic but still meaningful phenotype with regards to calves, and incorporate that into the national evaluation, I'm positive that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be able to make meaningful change and meaningful selection decisions to really make a robust and resilient animal for generations to come. So those are really exciting fields, especially with the incorporation of all of these new technologies. I know I hope that we've shown our viewers here today that we've got a really great team of motivated people who are thinking hard about what areas we can improve, where to bite into the challenges that the industry is facing. And I think that our future is going to be bright if we can manage to keep working together and to keep identifying these important challenges that are facing the industry. So I think it's
well said, Christine. Music to my ears.
Yeah, no, let's do it. Let's get there. I would like to ask you guys, Mike and Eduardo, if you've got any final comments or summarizing statements from our discussion today. Michael.
I'm just really excited. I think the next 10 to 20 years here is going to be very interesting, especially with, all the established researchers, but also this young group of researchers here at Guelph. And we're all really very interested in, doing research from the farmer for the farmer and also working together. So that's all my final comments, is that it's going to be exciting 5 to 10, maybe 20 years here.
Going to be great. Eduardo, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. It's just great to be part of this group there at Guelph with experts in so many different areas of dairy production that you can just reach out to them at any time, right, and exchange ideas, and that makes a difference. I can give a few examples in my research program. I incorporating nutrition, so I can talk with Mike, with John Kent, and others about nutrition and have a discussion, see if what I'm proposing makes sense or not, and go to the genomics and talk with Christine and Flavio and Angela. And so there's a lot to collaborate. There's a lot of people to collaborate, great people, very experts in the field, and that's very exciting for me. I'm sure it's for everyone in the group, and having a strong industry around makes even more special. So the farmers are always open to hear us and to collaborate with us, with the University of Guelph historically, as far as I know. So that relationship, I think, is so important, and it makes our programs, I don't know, it's more important, more special to be part of this than when you're integrated in a program that goes from basic science to the farmer to the final answer. So yeah, just excited about being part of this group.
Excellent.
And thanks for the invitation, Christine, to be part of this conversation. It was great.
Thank you both very much for your time. I know that you're both teaching courses this semester, as am I. So there's plenty other things to do. than have chats like this, but it is indeed really stimulating, I think, and really motivating as well to see that we're all on the same track, we're all on the same boat, and we are very, very optimistic about what our future in working with the Canadian dairy industry will look like in the coming years. So with that, I would like to thank you both very much for your time. I would like to thank our viewers of this Dairy at Guelph panel discussion, and I would like to invite you all to join us next month for the next panel discussion that will be available here at on the Dairy at Guelph website. Thank you very, very much, and have a wonderful day.